only stitching, but also talking about it.
Well, we are very excited. And I was reading through your bio, and you really did grow up with a needle in your hand.
I mean, truly did.
It really was something that, in fact, we encourage here today, that, bring the children. Don't tell me they're too young to stitch.
Absolutely. I think if they see you doing it, they want to emulate you, and that's an excellent way for youngins to get used to it. We don't have a heritage of handwork in the United States, unfortunately, as they do in Europe, and I wish that we did, because it's certainly been an integral part of my life and has helped me through good times and bad times, celebratory times and tragic times. There's always been stitching to go back to comfort me. So I hope others have that, and youngsters particularly. They're obviously good with their thumbs. They are texting all the time. We just have to get a needle in their hand.
Well, one of the books that you've written, and I'm going to have you go through the titles, but one of the books that you've written, which I happen to have on the shelf in front of me, and in fact, my children, I have 4 children, and all of whom stitch, girls and boys, guys out there. If you're thinking boys don't stitch, my boys stitch better than my girls, okay?
Absolutely. They have a keen mind for it, and as long as there's no prejudice against them stitching, they're really actually much more patient than girls are.
They are. But there is a book that you wrote just for kids.
I did. It's very whimsically done. It is called Needlepoint for Kids, and the cover of it is unique because it looks like an old school book, the black and white composition books we used to have years ago. That's the cover that we created for this. It's kind of cartoony in the inside of it, but it talks about upright stitches and laying down stitches, and then the last third of it talks about the basic basket weave and continental. So even though the title is Needlepoint for Kids, it's excellent for anyone who is a little bit confused on what seems to be the easiest stitched basket weave, but really isn't. So that book is very graphically fun and joyful to read.
Well, when we teach kids here, and we teach kids quite a bit. In fact, I had a customer here this morning who was in to start a brand new piece. She really had never stitched anything beyond a continental. And her 14-year-old daughter happened to be home from school today, so she dragged her along. And before you know it, we had a piece for the 14-year-old, too, so she was stitching. But I'll tell you, and I'm just wondering if this is something that you do as well, or if you have a different take on things. Usually when I start with kids, I start with straight stitches.
Usually up and down stitches, straight up and down stitches, just because it's easier for them to do that. But they catch on very quickly, even if it's on a diagonal. And I found great success with all ages doing it that way. I think sometimes when we thrust basket weave at someone out of the gate, it confuses them, and then they get frustrated, and then they don't want to continue. We want them to feel great success right at the beginning, and so interestingly, some of the decorative stitches like Parisian or Hungarian, the up and down stitches, are far easier to comprehend. Just simple gobelins in colorful ways can create a rainbow or whatever. That makes a child and even an adult feel very successful. I've had children as young as 5 work with me. In fact, an interesting story, I had a grandmother, great-grandmother actually, and a grandchild come and take class together. So all ages can enjoy the craft that we love so much. But they need a good beginning.
They are, but they're great. So guys out there, if you are working with your grandchildren and, or with your children and you want to start them on something, you know what? You know what? Even if you don't have access to a shop nearby, take out a little piece of canvas. And believe me, it can be 18 count because their eyes are better than ours.
Absolutely, absolutely. Or very young. Sometimes we get meat on a plastic tray, and we're always trying to recycle. Those plastic trays can have holes punched into them, and children can do long stitches like old sewing cards right on the plastic tray. So they can be very young working with a blunt-pointed needle, big eye. They're going to be successful. The hardest part will be threading the needle, but that's what grandmothers are for.
Exactly. That is a great idea, especially if you have a child who's, I think, probably in the 3-year-old range.
Right. Even a big shoelace.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, even a big shoelace works really well. Then you have to thread the needle. And shoelaces now come in myriads of colors, so it's fun.
And they can take it out and do it again and take it out and do it again.
Right. That's right. They'll find it fascinating in their stitching with Grandma, and what a great memory for both Grandma and the child. So, indeed, I encourage that tremendously. Another book that I wrote was Christmas Medallions, and that was a result of a young stitcher. She actually was going off to college, and her very first project was a dog collar. And then after that, she came back at Christmas time and said she wanted to give a gift to her newest sorority sisters. And, it was like a Thanksgiving. She came home ready to do a project and not a lot of time. So I encouraged her to look through some Bargello patterns that I had, and she created darling little heart-shaped projects, which in fact appear in that book, Christmas Medallions. So if you have a child that's been doing upright stitches, you can bypass Continental and Basque weave completely and just get them into Bargello. And the Christmas Medallions book is a good inspiration for that. They're tiny projects that can be completed very quickly and just mounted with paper and hung on the tree. So all ages can do it, and it doesn't have to be outrageously expensive.
Well, that is, and I think that's one thing people, we laugh here and we say, needlepoint is not a cheap hobby. But you know what? It doesn't have to be the most expensive thing you've ever done either.
Right. There are a variety of textiles to use, and they don't all have to be outrageously expensive. Of course, high-end things, yes, it is expensive. But, again, some of the things we do are going to be family heirlooms forever, or they may just be on the tree once a year. Then they don't have to be real expensive to complete.
That's right. Now, but you've also written a Bargello book.
I've actually written 2 Bargello books. The first one was the best Bargello book, I called it, and it's the largest of the books. Actually in width, it's about the size of a half of a long sheet of paper. And the reason I went in that format, which was, stepping out of the line for me, was that the graphics were so beautiful. I was able to print in color, and I also had, charting that was much larger, so we have a few years older can still read the charts easily. So the book is a little bit bigger, therefore a little more expensive, but it is the nearest thing I've created to a coffee table book, but most beautiful and most useful. And then the second Bargello book was the one I mentioned earlier, the Christmas Medallions. I found sometimes customers in the last minute wanted to create a hostess gift or a gift for a child very close to the holidays, and as you know, with fabrication, our deadlines are growing earlier and earlier, as early as September 15th. So, we're not even thinking Christmas at that time. So the Christmas Bargellos were the smallest little patterns that could fit into pre-stitched items from Lee Company. They have a wonderful plasticized metallic look that one can slip the finished needlepoint into its place, or simply just take cut-out paper and insert the medallion into that. So those 2, their subject material happens to be a Bargello. So we're hoping the 70s are back again in clothing as well as in needlepoint. And easy to do. My point is, again, I'm trying to get those baby boomers are obviously going to be stitching a lot, but those techie kids, they're not doing a lot. They want instant gratification, and Bargello does that, especially if they're doing their first department in IKEA. A lot of those Bargello patterns look very contemporary, and they can do them quickly.
Well, there is a line. Excuse me, I apologize. We have something here at the shop for cell phone cases that was very popular among that, quote, younger set, because the stitching was just a small area, and it just pops into a cell phone case, and poof, it's done. And in fact, we're in the midst of designing now covers for, all of the, electronic readers out there, for the books, for the e-books and all of that. Because, we're carrying around all these very expensive electronic toys. But, all of these toys need covers of some type. I don't care whether it's the cell phone, your iPod, or the plain old phone like I carry, or an e-reader or an e-book. We need to cover it with something. And like anything else in our lives, we like to personalize it. And needlepoint is a great way to do that.
Very durable, too, because obviously if you're